I hadn't seen Lauren in over a year, not since the divorce papers were signed. It wasn't a messy split, not at first. We didn't scream at each other in court or fight over furniture like people expect. No, it was slow, like a ship taking on water, sinking an inch at a time until we realized we were too far gone to save. So when I got the text, I hesitated. Lauren, hey, would love to catch up. Dinner at my place? Just us. Like old times. There was no reason to say yes. We had moved on. Or at least she had. She got remarried 6 months ago to some finance guy named Eric. The type of guy who always had a pressed shirt and a confident handshake. The kind of guy who wasn't me. I had spent the past year putting myself back together, trying to rebuild some sense of normal. And yet, I found myself typing back. Me, sure. What time? I told myself I was just curious. Nothing more. Maybe she wanted closure. Maybe she regretted things. Maybe, no. That was dangerous thinking. I pushed it aside. The night of the dinner, I pulled up to our old house, her house now. It looked the same. Porch light still flickering like it always did. The hydrangeas she planted still lined the walkway. Even the welcome mat was the same one we had picked out together. I knocked, and she opened the door almost immediately, like she had been waiting right there. "Hey," she said, giving me that smile. The one I used to wake up to. I forced a smile back. "Hey." She stepped aside, and I walked in. The smell of roasted chicken filled the house. Garlic. Rosemary. It smelled familiar. Too familiar. "You didn't have to go all out," I said, looking around. The table was set. Candles, a bottle of wine already uncorked. 2 plates, side by side, not across from each other. I noticed the small details. The way she had set my napkin folded the way I used to like. The way my glass was filled with whiskey instead of wine. It was like stepping into a time machine. She shrugged. I wanted tonight to be nice. I sat, watching as she moved around the kitchen. She had always been effortless in the way she carried herself, graceful without trying. She poured herself a drink and sat down next to me. "To old friends," she said, raising her glass. I hesitated before clinking mine against hers. "To old friends." The conversation started light. Small talk, updates. Work was fine. Life was fine. Everything was just fine. But then, after a few drinks, the conversation started drifting into the past. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. I exhaled slowly. "About what?" She looked at me then, really looked at me. "Us." A part of me wanted to lie, to say no. But I wasn't a good liar. "Yeah," I admitted. "Sometimes." She smiled like that was the answer she wanted. "Me too." Silence stretched between us. It was comfortable, but heavy. Something unspoken hung in the air. She reached across the table, resting her hand on mine. Just for a second. A second too long. And then we heard it. A car pulling into the driveway. Lauren's face went pale. "He's not supposed to be home yet." My stomach dropped. The way she said it, too fast, too guilty. I stood, stepping away from the table as headlights flashed through the front window. A car door slammed shut. "David, you need to go," she said, her voice urgent now. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just dinner. This wasn't just catching up. I had walked into something else entirely. I barely had time to process what was happening before Lauren was on her feet, grabbing my arm. "You need to leave." "No." My brain was still catching up. The wine, the candles, the way she looked at me, it all clicked into place. This wasn't just dinner. This was a mistake. Eric wasn't supposed to be home. That was the plan. But now his car was in the driveway, and the sound of his keys jangling outside the door sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. "David," Lauren hissed, eyes darting around the room, searching for a way out. I knew this house like the back of my hand. I could slip through the back door, hop the fence. I could be gone in seconds. But something in me hesitated. Not fear. Not self-preservation. I wanted to know. Why invite me here? Why set the table like she did? Why the lingering touches, the old jokes, the talk about us. I wanted answers. And judging by the sheer panic on Lauren's face, I wasn't the only one who knew this whole thing looked bad. Too late. The door swung open. Eric stepped in, shaking rain off his jacket, tossing his keys on the side table. He was a tall guy, built like someone who spent his free time golfing and closing deals over whiskey. His sharp blue eyes flickered toward the dinner table. The wine. The 2 plates. Then they landed on me. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. A flicker of something. Curiosity, suspicion. David. His voice was smooth, even. Didn't expect to see you here. Lauren jumped in too fast. He was just leaving. Eric barely glanced at her. He kept his focus on me. That right. I met his gaze, forcing myself to stay calm. Yeah. Just catching up. He stepped forward, peeling off his jacket, moving slow. Calculated. His eyes flicked between us, taking in every detail. Lauren, standing too stiffly. The way my whiskey glass was half empty, like I'd been here for a while. The tension in the air so thick you could cut it with a knife. Catching up, Eric repeated. Lauren let out a nervous laugh, too high-pitched. We were just reminiscing. You know, old times. That was the wrong thing to say. Eric's jaw clenched. I could see it now, the realization settling in, piece by piece. This wasn't just dinner. I wasn't just an old friend. Eric turned to Lauren, his voice still calm, but now laced with something colder. Didn't you say you never talked to David anymore? Lauren's face drained of color. I should have left. I should have walked out the second I heard his car in the driveway. But something in me wanted to see how this played out. She swallowed hard. I just thought it would be nice to catch up. That's all. Eric stared at her, then at me. And in that moment, I could see the wheels turning in his head. He wasn't a stupid man. He was a man who knew when something wasn't right. And right now, nothing about this looked right. The room went quiet, except for the rain tapping against the windows. Then Eric smiled. A tight, forced smile. Hell, he said, walking over to the table. If we're catching up, why didn't you wait for me? Lauren tensed beside me. Eric. He grabbed an empty glass, poured himself a whiskey, and sat down right in my seat. Sit down, David, he said, nodding at the chair across from him. Let's all talk. Lauren shot me a pleading look, her eyes screaming don't. But I pulled the chair back and sat. Because now I wanted to see exactly where this was going. I sat down, forcing myself to look calm, but my pulse was hammering in my throat. Eric leaned back in his chair, swirling the whiskey in his glass, studying me. Studying us. Lauren stood frozen, hands gripping the back of her chair like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She shot me a look, half desperation, half warning. Eric took a sip of his drink. So, he said, slow and deliberate. What's new, David? I knew what this was. He wasn't just making conversation. He was feeling me out, testing me, trying to see if I would flinch. I gave him a small shrug. Not much. Work's been busy. He nodded like he cared. Like this was a normal dinner between friends and not a moment that could turn ugly real fast. Lauren didn't mention you two were in touch again, he said, glancing her way. She stiffened. It was just a last-minute thing. Eric let that hang in the air, letting the weight of it press down. Then he turned his attention back to me. You know, he said, I always wondered about you two. I didn't move. Wondered what? He tilted his head, considering. How you let a woman like Lauren go. I caught the flicker of tension in Lauren's face. She was barely breathing. I forced a smirk, keeping my voice steady. Guess we weren't meant to be. Eric gave a small chuckle, shaking his head. Funny thing, though. Lauren told me you were the jealous type. Lauren's eyes snapped to him, wide and alert. Eric. But he kept going, his voice still smooth, still casual. Always worried some other guy was gonna swoop in. Am I remembering that right, babe? Lauren's hands curled into fists against the chair. I don't think this is necessary. Eric ignored her. He was locked in on me now, eyes sharp, Testing. I could play along. Act unfazed. Act like I hadn't just walked into the most uncomfortable dinner of my life. I leaned back, mirroring his relaxed posture. I wouldn't call it jealousy. Just caution. Eric smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Caution. He took another sip, watching me over the rim of his glass. The way a man watches someone he already knows is lying. Lauren stepped in. Maybe we should just... Eric cut her off. You know, David, he said, setting his drink down with a clink, you've got some nerve. Silence. Lauren inhaled sharply, but Eric wasn't looking at her anymore. He was locked in on me, the forced politeness finally cracking. I kept my face neutral. How's that? He let out a dry laugh, shaking his head like he couldn't believe I had the audacity to ask. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table. You walk into my house, he said, voice low now, dangerous. Sit at my table, drink my whiskey, and you expect me to believe this is just some friendly dinner? Lauren's breath hitched. Eric, stop. He ignored her. His stare burned into me, waiting for me to break. I could lie. I could say this really was innocent, that there was nothing between me and Lauren. But we all knew that wasn't true. So I didn't say anything. And that silence, that was my mistake. Eric let out another laugh, softer this time, like he finally had his answer. He pushed his chair back and stood. You know what? He said, rubbing his jaw. I think I need some fresh air. Lauren took a step toward him, panicked. Eric, please. But he was already walking toward the door, grabbing his keys off the table. Right before he stepped outside, he looked back at me. I'd be real careful if I were you, David. Then he was gone. The front door slammed shut, and Lauren turned to me, her face pale. What the hell were you thinking? She whispered. I exhaled, rubbing my temples. I was thinking I'd like to know what the hell is going on here. She looked toward the door, like she was afraid Eric might come back any second. Then she grabbed my wrist, pulling me toward the kitchen. We don't have time for this, she said, voice shaking. You need to leave before he... Before he what? She didn't finish. And something about the way she looked at me, the fear in her eyes, made me realize. This wasn't over. Not even close. Lauren gripped my wrist so tight her nails dug into my skin. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. You need to go, she whispered. Now. I yanked my arm free. Not until you tell me what the hell that was about. Her eyes darted toward the front door, like she expected it to fly open at any second. She shook her head. David, please. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have invited you. I let out a dry laugh, stepping back. No kidding. But you did. So why? What was this really about? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Like she wanted to tell me something but couldn't. Or shouldn't. Outside, I heard the rumble of an engine. Eric hadn't left yet. He was still sitting in his car. Waiting. Lauren let out a shaky breath. You have no idea what you just walked into. I crossed my arms. Then maybe you should start explaining. She hesitated, then ran a hand through her hair, turning away. God, I was so stupid, she muttered. I don't know what I thought. That maybe we could talk, maybe I could, she stopped herself. Could what? I pressed. She swallowed hard. I wanted to see if we still had something. If we still felt something. I exhaled sharply. I had suspected as much, but hearing her say it hit different. So this was a test? I asked, voice tight. She shook her head. No, not a test. She let out a bitter laugh. God, I don't even know anymore. I thought I was happy with Eric, but lately, things have been off. I frowned. Off how? She bit her lip, hesitating again. Then, finally, she looked at me. He's not who I thought he was. That was the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. A chill ran down my spine. What does that mean, Lauren? I asked carefully. She hesitated again, chewing on the inside of her cheek. Like saying it out loud would make it real. I took a step closer. Is he hurting you? Her breath caught, but she didn't answer. That was enough. I cursed under my breath, raking a hand through my hair. Jesus, Lauren, why didn't you say something? Because I can handle it, she said quickly, almost too quickly. I gave her a sharp look. Doesn't look like you're handling it. She swallowed hard. It's complicated. I let out a humorless laugh. No, it's actually pretty simple. If he's hurting you, you leave. She let out a frustrated breath. It's not that easy, David. You don't understand. A loud thud outside made us both freeze. We turned toward the window. Eric was still sitting in his car, hands gripping the wheel. But now, he was looking straight at us. Even from here, I could feel the heat of his stare. Lauren let out a shaky breath. You need to go out the back. I kept my eyes on Eric. No. I'm walking out the front door. David. If I sneak out, he wins, I said firmly. He'll think there was something to hide. Lauren hesitated, then nodded slowly. I stepped toward the door, my pulse steady but my body tense. Lauren grabbed my wrist one last time. David, she whispered. Please. Just go home and forget this happened. I looked at her. Her face was full of regret. But also something else. Something deeper. I didn't know if it was fear. Or guilt. Maybe both. I exhaled. Lauren, whatever's going on, you don't have to go through it alone. Her grip tightened, just for a second. Then she let go. I opened the door and stepped outside. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle, the pavement slick beneath my shoes. Eric's car engine was still running. But he didn't move. I walked down the steps, hands in my pockets, keeping my pace steady. I could feel his eyes on me the whole way. I reached my car, unlocked it, and got in. Still, he didn't move. Didn't turn the engine off. Didn't drive away. He was waiting. For what, I didn't know. But as I pulled out of the driveway and onto the road, one thought kept circling in my mind. This wasn't over. Not even close. I drove through the dark streets, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by something colder. Heavier. Eric knew. Maybe he didn't have proof, but he felt it. That gut instinct, that sixth sense you get when something isn't right. He wasn't stupid. And I had just given him a reason to suspect the worst. I checked my rearview mirror. No headlights. No sign of him following me. But that didn't mean I was in the clear. Lauren's words kept replaying in my head. You have no idea what you just walked into. I should have left the second I saw the candles on the table. Should have ignored her text. Should have. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I snatched it up, half expecting Lauren. But it wasn't her. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Yeah. Silence. Then a low, measured voice. David. Eric. I clenched my jaw. How'd you get my number? A chuckle. Come on. I know everything about you. A chill crawled up my spine. I don't know what you think happened tonight, I said, forcing my voice to stay even. Oh, I know exactly what happened, Eric said smoothly. You thought you'd come sniffing around my wife, see if there was still a spark. And I bet she played right into it, didn't she? I didn't answer. His voice dropped lower, almost amused. I bet she told you she's unhappy. That things have been off between us. He let out a small laugh. She's good at that, isn't she? Making a man feel like he's the only thing that makes her truly happy. Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. Lauren's a grown woman, I said. If she's unhappy, maybe that's something you should take up with her. A pause. Then, you still don't get it, do you? I frowned. Get what? Eric sighed like I was a slow student. You think you're the first. The words hit like a punch to the gut. My grip on the wheel tightened. What the hell are you talking about? She does this, David. She collects men like you. His voice was light, conversational, like we were two old friends talking over drinks. She strings them along, makes them feel special, makes them think she's trapped in some unhappy life, that she needs rescuing. I shook my head. That's bullshit. Is it? His tone was mocking now. Tell me something. How did it feel, sitting at that table, drinking my whiskey, hearing her talk about old times? Did it make you feel needed? Wanted? I stayed silent. His voice hardened. You were just her little what-if, David. That's all you ever were. A safety net. A fallback. A reminder that she could still have you if she really wanted to. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. I wanted to hang up. To tell him to go to hell. But something in his voice, something too damn confident, made me stay on the line. She did the same thing to the guy before you, Eric continued, his tone turning almost lazy now, like he was enjoying himself. And the guy before him. And before that. Well, let's just say she's got a history. I exhaled through my nose. If you hate her so much, why are you still with her? His laugh was quiet, but there was no humor in it. Because I knew what I was getting into. Unlike you. A cold weight settled in my gut. Let me ask you something, Eric said. Do you really think tonight was the first time she thought about calling you? I didn't answer. You were always in the back of her mind. Not because she loves you, but because she hates losing control. She likes knowing you'll always come when she calls. That's what excites her. Not you. Just the power. I gritted my teeth. Sounds like you're the one with trust issues. Oh, I don't trust her at all, he admitted, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. But trust doesn't matter when you own someone. I froze. What the hell does that mean? Eric sighed like he was bored of the conversation. Lauren is complicated. She's a woman who craves control but always ends up in the hands of men who take it away from her. She can't help herself. It's a cycle. He paused. And you? You're just another piece in her little game. She doesn't love you, David. She never did. I swallowed hard. She'll cry to you. She'll tell you she's trapped. She'll make you feel like you can save her. His voice dropped to a whisper. But she doesn't want saving. Silence stretched between us. Then Eric exhaled, like he was done explaining. You really need to stay away from my wife, David. The way he said it, calm, certain, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I finally found my voice. Or what? Eric chuckled. Come on. You're a smart guy. Then the line went dead. I sat there, phone still in my hand, heart hammering. For the first time all night, I wasn't sure who I should be afraid of. Eric. Or Lauren. I didn't sleep that night. Eric's words rattled around in my head like a loose bullet, clanging against every doubt, every suspicion I'd buried. She doesn't love you. She never did. That wasn't true. It couldn't be. Could it? I spent half the night pacing my apartment, the other half staring at my phone, waiting for Lauren to text. She didn't. And that silence. It was louder than anything Eric had said. By morning, I had made up my mind. I needed answers. Real answers. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to her house. It was early, barely 7 a.m., but I didn't care. If Eric was there, so be it. If this was some game, I wanted to see just how far she was willing to play it. I parked a few houses down and walked to her front door, knocking hard. A few seconds passed. Then the door cracked open just enough for me to see her face. Lauren's eyes widened. David. What are you? I need to talk to you. She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. Is he here? I asked. She shook her head. No. He left early for work. I exhaled. Then let me in. For a moment, I thought she was going to say no. But then she stepped aside, opening the door fully. I walked in, and immediately, it felt different. The house, the air, her. Gone was the warm, carefully planned atmosphere of last night. No candles, no wine, no effort. Just an empty house that suddenly felt way too cold. She closed the door, wrapping her arms around herself. David, I don't think you should be here. I turned to face her. Why? Because Eric told you to keep me away. Her face twisted in confusion. What? I pulled out my phone. He called me last night. Told me I was just another name on your list. That you collect men like me. Lauren flinched, looking away. I took a step closer. Was he right? Silence. My stomach twisted. Jesus, Lauren, just tell me the truth. She let out a shaky breath, rubbing her temples. David, She looked up at me, and for the first time I saw something raw in her eyes. Guilt. I felt my chest tighten. I stepped back, laughing bitterly. Wow. So he was right. No, she moved toward me, reaching for my arm, but I pulled away. Then tell me, I demanded. Tell me that I wasn't just some backup plan. That you didn't invite me over last night just to see if I was still on the hook. Her lip trembled. And there it was. That hesitation. I ran a hand through my hair, letting out a rough breath. Jesus Christ, Lauren. It wasn't like that, she said quickly. I did miss you. I do think about us. I let out a dry laugh. Yeah. How many other guys have you thought about like that? Tears welled in her eyes. It's not what you think. Then explain it, I snapped. Because right now, it looks like I was just another idiot waiting in the wings while you played house with him. She sucked in a breath, shoulders shaking. Eric twisted everything. I stared at her. Did he? Silence. I shook my head. You're not denying it. She wiped at her eyes, frustration clear on her face. David, I don't know how to make you understand. Try. She swallowed hard, then turned away, hugging herself. I don't do it on purpose, she said softly. I swear I don't. But sometimes, I don't know. I feel stuck. Like my life is moving without me, like I don't have any control. And when that happens, I start thinking about the past. About the people who made me feel something. I clenched my jaw. And what? You reach out to see if they're still there? Just to know you could have them if you wanted. Her silence told me everything. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Unbelievable. Tears streamed down her face now. David, I never meant to hurt you. But you did. I exhaled sharply, looking away. You knew what you were doing when you invited me here. She closed her eyes. I was selfish. I scoffed. That's putting it lightly. A long, heavy silence stretched between us. Then I asked the question I'd been dreading. Do you love him? Her head snapped up. What? I swallowed hard. Eric. Do you love him? Her lips parted, but no words came out. That was all I needed to know. I nodded slowly, stepping back. I need to go. Lauren's face crumpled. David, please. No, I cut her off. I don't know what game you were playing, but I'm done. I turned toward the door. But before I could reach it, she spoke again. He hurts me. I froze. My hands curled into fists. What did you just say? She let out a shaky breath. Eric. He's not a good man. I turned back slowly. He's hitting you. Her face twisted. Not like that. But he controls me. Every little thing. What I wear. Who I talk to. Where I go. And if I push back, she swallowed hard. He finds ways to punish me. A hot, furious anger surged through me. Lauren, you need to leave him. She let out a bitter laugh. You think I haven't tried? He owns everything. My bank accounts, my car, my house. If I leave, I have nothing. I stared at her, my chest rising and falling. For a second, I almost believed her. Almost. But something didn't sit right. If she was really afraid of him, why risk inviting me over? Why tempt fate? Then the realization hit me like a freight train. This isn't about escaping him, I said slowly. Her lips trembled. David. I took a step closer. You wanted me to be the one to end things. Her breath hitched. I shook my head, disgusted. Jesus Christ, Lauren. You wanted me to fight for you. To force his hand. To make this whole thing explode so you wouldn't have to make a choice. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I didn't mean. But that's exactly what you did, I snapped. You pulled me into your mess so you wouldn't have to get your hands dirty. She let out a sob, covering her face. I turned back to the door, yanking it open. And that's when I saw him, Eric, standing at the bottom of the steps, watching, waiting. His eyes met mine, and he smiled. But it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile a man gives when he knows he's already won. Eric stood at the bottom of the steps, hands in his pockets, rain misting down around him. He wasn't in a rush. He wasn't angry. He wasn't surprised. He was waiting. Like he knew this moment was coming. Like he had planned for it. Lauren sucked in a sharp breath behind me, going completely still. I clenched my jaw. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to keep my face neutral. The last thing I was going to do was let him see me rattle. "Morning," Eric said, his voice smooth, amused. "Hope I'm not interrupting." My grip tightened on the doorknob. "What do you want?" He tilted his head, eyes flicking between me and Lauren. "I could ask you the same thing." Lauren shifted beside me. "Eric, please." But he held up a hand, cutting her off. "You know," he said, still looking at me, "I wasn't sure if you were stupid or just desperate." His lips curled. "Now I'm thinking it's both." I didn't take the bait. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me, putting myself between him and Lauren. "You've made your point. I'm leaving." Eric chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh no, David. You don't just walk away from something like this." I crossed my arms, forcing my voice to stay calm. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not interested." He smirked. "You were interested last night." I gritted my teeth. "Lauren told me everything." His expression didn't change. "Oh. And what version of everything did she give you?" "You control her," I said. "You make her feel trapped. She's afraid of you." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. A small shift. Then he laughed. Not loud. Just a quiet, knowing chuckle. "Afraid," he repeated. "Oh, David." He sighed. "You really are an idiot." I took a step forward. "You think this is funny?" His smirk didn't waver. "I think you don't know who the real manipulator is." I clenched my fists. "What the hell does that mean?" He leaned in slightly, voice dropping low. "Let me ask you something. If she's so afraid of me, why did she invite you over?" I opened my mouth, then stopped. He saw it. That second of hesitation. That tiny crack in my certainty. And he went in for the kill. "Lauren isn't afraid of me," he said. "She's afraid of losing control. That's what she does. She plays the victim, makes men feel like they're her hero." He tilted his head. "And guess what, David? You fell for it. Just like every other dumbass before you." I swallowed hard. "She said you'd say this. She knew you'd try to twist things." He smirked. "Of course she did. That's the beauty of it. No matter what I say, she's already framed the story in your head. She's always a step ahead." My pulse pounded. I wanted to tell him he was full of shit. That I knew Lauren. That I knew what I felt last night was real. But then I remembered. The candles. The way she touched my hand. The way she let things hang in the air just long enough for me to get ideas. The way she looked at me when Eric came home, not like she was afraid of him. Like she was afraid of being caught. Eric saw it. That doubt creeping into my face. His smile widened. "There it is." I exhaled sharply. "Doesn't matter. I'm done. I don't want anything to do with this." His expression didn't change. "Good." I turned to walk away, but his voice stopped me. "Just one more thing, David." I paused. Didn't turn around. "You do realize this was never about you, right?" I stiffened. "Lauren doesn't want you. She never did." His voice was quieter now. "She just wanted a way out. And she was hoping you'd be the one to take the hit." I turned slowly. "What?" His smirk was gone now. "You think I wouldn't have noticed if she was trying to leave me? You think I wasn't paying attention?" He scoffed. "I knew about her little dinner plans. Hell, I let it happen. I wanted to see how far she'd go. My stomach turned. You let it happen? Eric nodded. And if you had taken the bait? He let out a low chuckle. If I had walked in and caught you two doing something more than talking? His eyes darkened. Well, that would have made things a lot more interesting. My blood ran cold. That was it. That was the whole game. Lauren hadn't invited me over to reminisce. She hadn't even invited me over because she wanted me back. She wanted an escape hatch. And she didn't care if it destroyed me in the process. I took a shaky breath. She played us both. Eric gave a slow nod. Now you're getting it. I felt sick. I turned back to the house, looking at the door I had just stepped out of. 4 years, I had loved her. Even after everything, even after the divorce, some stupid part of me had held on to this idea of her. But now all I saw was a trap I had almost walked straight into. I turned back to Eric. I'm done. He nodded approvingly. Smart man. I didn't say anything else. I just walked past him, out toward my car. I half expected him to say something, to throw one last jab. But he didn't. Because he didn't need to. The game was over. And I had finally realized I had never even been a real player.